What up, Raf leaders? Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to answer the question, how rich is Guyana and why is crime rising in a country that is as rich as Guyana? In other words, given the fact that we are now an oil producing country and generating significant revenues at a consistent level and pace, why is it that crime is rising in the year 2021? Now, I made a previous video where I predicted that the sovereign wealth fund will reach $1 billion by 2022, March 2022, somewhere between March and June 2023, second quarter of 2022. And now in the month of July 2021, we have the second quarter report released from the Bank of Guyana. Bank of Guyana has just released the second quarter report for the Natural Resource Fund or the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and shows that the fund contains 344.16 million US dollars. 344.16 million US dollars. That's because the price of oil is rising, and the last time they sold 1 million barrels of oil, sometime in the second quarter, they got $62.6 million from it. And since then, the price of oil has gone above $70 a barrel. In fact, it was about $75 a barrel when they sold the last shipment to India. Now, this is not recorded in the second quarter report, but that money is already in the bank, and we should probably add it to the 344 million. And if you did that, you'd probably end up with somewhere around 440 or 430 million dollars currently in the bank, right? So what I'm saying is that the second quarter report is really not up to date. It's not accurate. It doesn't include the last shipment of oil which we sold to India for over $75 million, plus the royalties that we get when oil is produced, right? So the question is, why is it that in a country that has now 440 or 450 million dollars in our sovereign wealth fund, why is crime still rising? Now, I made a video previously at the beginning of this whole oil boom in 2017. I released a video where I asked how rich is Guyana, and I showed a couple of guys playing drums on Regent Street, and I said over the years I will follow up with these guys to find out how the money obtained from the oil industry, impacts the regular man in the street, just like these guys who are playing drums on Regent Street. And I made a video last week where I showed a couple of people on the street, including myself. We got robbed at gunpoint by motorcycle bandits. That is, 4 guys on motorcycles held us up with guns, made us sit on the ground, then took away my backpack in which I had my iPad and my tennis gear because I was on my way to play tennis. And the other 2 people lost their cell phones and money and jewelry and so on. And this is something that is happening at an alarming and an increasing rate in the last several months. In other words, street crime is escalating in Guyana, even as money is flowing into the coffers, money is flowing into the Natural Resource Fund, into the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We're now, according to Bank of Guyana, $344.16 million in the Natural Resource Fund, and based on my own calculations, we're actually over $400 million in our Natural Resource Fund. There's development all around the country. You can see building, construction going up. The government is building roads. Even yesterday I came to South Rumvelt by the junction to look at the new bypass road that they're going to build, right, connecting the Mandela Avenue, bypassing the East Bank Road and running all the way up perhaps to Susdike. And all of this development is happening, but crime is going up. Crime is rising at an alarming rate. And the question is, why is crime rising? Who is crime affected? Who's being affected by the rising crime? And what is the future? What's the prospect for the future? Now, I'm going to give you my opinion, having lived in this country again for the last 7.5 years, because I returned here in October 2013, right? And I've been here continuously since then. And this is what I observed. When I arrived here in October 2013, crime was very, very high. In fact, what was happening is murder for hire was the most prevalent and most frightening crime, because somebody could hire any one of these unemployed young men in the street to shoot or kill somebody else who they had a dispute with, and it was happening all around. There's a lady, Sister Clemmy, who went to our church in Camp Street, who was murdered for her property, right? Some businessman wanted her property she wasn't willing to sell, and the story goes she was shot and killed on her front steps by a young man who apparently was paid to kill her. So this was what was happening in 2013. And then there was an election, and the PPP lost that election, and then crime went down. What is happening now? Crime is going up again. And that is after the PPP won the 2020 election. A year later, the same kinds of violent street crime with guns is escalating again. And the question is why? Now here is my answer, because I've observed this for the last 7 years. The number one reason is racist government. Right? I've made a couple of videos, 3 videos in fact, about racism and how to handle it in Guyana. What is the main feature of racism in Guyana? It's spectacularly different from racism in Europe or racism in North America, but it exists as a unique form of racism in Guyana because it's Indian and Africans who occupy this country, and the rivalry has led to violent racism at times. So what has happened after the last election is that the PPP government decided to fire most, if not all, of the appointees. They considered people who they considered political appointees. So a lot of people, mostly black people, lost their jobs as a direct result of the change in government, which the PPP decided was necessary since they had a new government. Nobody protested, but what it meant is that a lot of people, mostly black people, ended up on the unemployment lines. The second thing that happened is that immediately after the election, in fact during the election, the PPP attacked mostly black businessmen. They were accused of benefiting unfairly from the previous government. They were accused of gaining property and land. So immediately after the PPP took office, they started prosecuting black businessmen, some of them prominent, well-known, long-standing black businessmen, trying to repossess land that they had possessed. Remember, the owner of Car Care was taken to court over land that he'd purchased. Sevons was taken, owner of Sevons, that is the waste disposal company, was taken to court over property that they had constructed. And a number of other black businessmen were essentially targeted because the government questioned their progress during the last 5 years. And so what ended up happening is that the government started targeting African Guyanese and creating uncertainty, creating unemployment among African Guyanese. And what happens over a period of time, over a year and a half of pandemic, over a long period of unemployment, people begin to be desperate, and that has resulted in crime, escalating gun crimes, just like there was in the previous 23 years of the PPP government. So my position is that this rising crime is a political, an outcome of the political position of the government. It is caused by politically driven policies, governance policies, right? And it's basically racist governance, right? I'm gonna give it to you straight, give it to you black and white. That is my first and most important reason that I'm attributing to the cause of the rising violent crime in the country. Now, the second question is, who is being affected by this crime? The fact is that poor people, all poor people are being affected. Rich people in this country can hire security guards and security services. They have cameras around their homes, and they have added security of moving around the country in vehicles, right? Sometimes even with a contingent of security, which the government ministers do all the time. Every time you pass, you're on the road and you see a long line of black cars with wailing sirens and flashing lights. It's usually a movement of the government ministers around the city. And so they have security. They're not being affected by this rising crime. The people who are being affected by rising crime are poor people in this country, right? People like me, people who are walking on the streets, who have to interact and who are exposed to the criminals who are now desperately seeking means of income after being unemployed for many, many years. You would have to ask, what is the unemployment rate in Guyana? I would posit that it's probably around 25% is the unemployment rate of youth in Guyana. And that is a recipe for crime. And finally, what is the prospect for the future? What is going to happen in the future? Well, I can say that things are going to get worse, right? I'm usually very optimistic, but unfortunately, in the case of crime, and because I'm now personally affected by it, I have to say that I have no expectation that the crime situation will improve in Guyana as long as the racist policies of the government continue to be implemented. And as long as people turn a blind eye, because a lot of people are assuming that, oh, you're lying. In fact, from the comments of that video, some people are saying, oh, these guys are not Venezuelan, they must be Guyanese because they have Guyanese accent, right? People are forgetting that your accent is not your nationality. There are Americans who speak with British accents or Russian accents or Indian accents or Pakistani accent. Your accent is not your nationality. These were Guyanese, these were Venezuelans, visitors to Guyana, who were in fact victim of Guyanese street crime. And so far nobody has contributed. I have not received any donations to help these two people who were the victims of that crime. Eventually I will in fact use my own resources to help purchase the items that these guys lost as a result of the crime, you know, through my own business ventures. But the fact is that no one or most people seem to doubt and disbelieve the reality of what is happening, and that is why this situation is going to get worse. It's not going to get worse because it's, the situation is the value of the economy is getting worse. In fact, that is the opposite. The economy is growing at about 50% per annum, and money is flowing into the coffers. The reason why the situation is going to get worse is because it's being ignored, and because it's being doubted, and because of the racist policies that are being implemented, and it's not affecting the people who are implementing those policies. The situation is going to get worse. Crime is going to get much more deadly, much more violent, because it's being ignored by the authorities and by people, in fact, who live abroad and who assume that their point of view is in fact reality, when in fact they're not here and they don't know what the reality is, and they're doubting the people who are here and telling you what the reality is. So guys, we have $344.16 million in our sovereign wealth fund, and we have over $400 million in the coffers, because this does not include the last shipment of oil which was sold to India. But crime keeps rising, and the question is why? It's because of racist policies that have marginalized black businesses and black employees in this country, creating higher unemployment and a higher disparity in employment and wealth between the various groups in this country. And that is why young people who are unemployed are responding with violence. I do not condone the violence, but I'm saying that this is the reason why it's happening. And this is also the reason why it will continue to happen, because the problem is being ignored, it's not being acknowledged, it's being denied. In fact, if you listen to the constant propaganda on television in Guyana, you will hear the government saying that racism doesn't exist, and these people who say that there's racism are not being truthful or being political. This is real, right? And it pains me to have to say this, but this is why crime is rising and why I have been the victim of crime in Guyana, in a country that is growing at the fastest rate of any country in the world, even in the middle of a pandemic. So that's what's happening, guys. Now, tell me what you think is happening. What's the reason why crime is rising in Guyana, in spite of the fact that the economy is growing very rapidly and we're gaining so much in oil revenue and so much development is happening around the country. Tell me what you think is the reason why crime is rising in Guyana. In the comments below, let me know why you think violent crime is on the rise in Guyana. And remember, you can share this video with friends and family around the world. Let people know what's happening in Guyana. Like, subscribe, and share these videos on other social media platforms. Remember to turn on notifications so that you can see whenever I release a video, and so you can keep track of what's happening here in Guyana. Later!